be we're talking about the propaganda project that was based on Mind Over Media, the Holocaust Museum's effort to create a user-generated content website for the discussion of contemporary propaganda. For all kinds of complicated reasons, that project has redounded to the Media Education Lab, and our goal is to launch that new website on October 31st, the anniversary of the infamous War of the Worlds hoax broadcast by Orson Welles. So in the next 60 days, we are hoping to create a initial set of materials that can be used to propagate the site and to support teachers as they explore contemporary propaganda. Ultimately, aiming to spend the late fall and spring of 2015 marketing, promoting, doing PD around that site, and sort of discovering what's possible. The whole thing is really an experiment to see whether or not user-generated content and discussion of contemporary propaganda can actually promote learning. So perhaps by next summer we'll have a plan for doing some kind of assessment, maybe with teachers who are using the site or learners who are using the site. But in the first phase of this project, we simply want to bring this, we want to birth the site. And the reality of it is it's 85% done. So in a lot of ways our hands are tied because we can't do too much to the site. It's cooked, and it's been cooking for a long, long time. So in about 45 minutes or so, at about 10 o'clock, we're going to meet with David Clevin from the Holocaust Museum. He's going to talk to us a little bit about his vision for the site, because his vision animated the site to begin with. We'll also have a short visit with Joanna Wasserman, who's been doing propaganda education as part of the State of Deception for the last 5 years. She's thought a lot about how to teach teachers how to have productive conversations with kids about propaganda. And then we'll end our meeting by kind of identifying a work plan and a kind of who does what around what needs to be done. So how does that sound like as a work plan for the next hour or so? Is that okay? Okay.
Easy.
Frank, do you have any questions before we begin?
Renee, has anybody done any surveys of students or teacher understanding or misunderstanding of what propaganda is?
Great question, and in fact the literature is incredibly slender on this, Frank. English teachers have not been making much of a big deal about propaganda since probably the 1980s. And so apart from relying on the glittering generalities, rhetorical devices that the Institute for Propaganda Analysis developed in the 1930s, there is not much literature on this at all. And I think in some ways we're going to be trying to recover the concept for a generation of teachers who has stepped away from it.
Would you also agree that Common Core's movement away from teaching techniques of persuasion and moving toward argument may in fact hurt the teaching of propaganda?
Whoa, that's a very bold claim. Now, I'm not sure about that. That'd be a cool thing for us to talk further about. I do think that the Common Core's focus on textual analysis works in favor of our efforts around propaganda. But you're right. Specifically, because of its focus on textual analysis, it may not actually privilege the teaching of rhetorical techniques. That's a really interesting possible, a policy brief that might come out of the work that we do together, because I do think we're in a discovery zone here.
I only say that because of my own work in teaching standards in South Carolina, where in English language arts in 2006 or 8, whatever, last time we did them, they teachers asked for more specificity in standard, and so we specifically put littering generalities, or we put specifics into the standards. And now when I look at Common Core, there's so little specificity, and
Right.
teachers don't know. Also, when I go to NCTE, which I won't be going to this year, but I pick up those textbooks and I start looking for how are the textbooks addressing propaganda.
Yeah.
We don't see much of it,
No.
unfortunately.
No. In a way, our project is going to try to recover the concept of the most controversial way possible, which is addressing contemporary propaganda. And when I go to the news literacy people are meeting in Chicago, not this weekend, Frank, but next weekend.
I'll be there.
I'm gonna. Oh, you are going to be there. Oh, good show. I'm so looking forward to it, because you know what drum I'm going to be beating, among others, is the news literacy folks may not be sufficiently aware of just how alienated American teachers are from news and current events. Because as much as they love bringing journalists in to talk about blah, 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 if classroom teachers aren't themselves reading the newspaper, aren't themselves being news consumers, and are afraid because of the polarized media environment to even talk about current events in the classroom, then that's a reality we have to really look square in the eye. So, and I'm sure you've experienced that yourself working with teachers, right? That there's a lot of anxious resistance, disinterest, apathy, and polarized culture has affected the way teachers feel engaged to talk about current events. In a way, our project might be a little bit of an antidote by acknowledging that reality and moving beyond it.
There's another study out, I think today, by Pew on millennial mistrust of institutions, including the news media.
Whoa, nice. Yeah, there you go. So in some ways, this idea of mistrust is pretty powerful. Now what I'm going to do is I want to take us to the website. Frank, I think you've probably already had a chance to look at this. It's mindovermedia.ushmm.org. There it is. And is it screen sharing now or not so much? Let's find out. Oh yeah, no, not so much. But here's the screencast. I'm just sharing my screen here.
Got it.
Here's what's going to be different about the site. It's going to say, propaganda is all around us. Do you know how to recognize and respond to it? Right? And these tabs at the top, I sent you guys. Did I send everybody the Google? Did I send everybody the Google links to that copy? Yes. Got it. So we're in the process of essentially revising the content for Learn. The content is going to be different content. Will go here, right? About the exhibit. Then Rate and Browse are going to switch. So what will happen is Learn will be first, and then Rate will be second. And instead of it saying, rate this example from not dangerous to dangerous, it will say, rate this example from beneficial to harmful. Right? Beneficial, because according to our definition of propaganda, propaganda can be beneficial. And then another thing that will change about the website is, see where it says background information? It kind of sounds like the voice of God, right? But the reality of it is, whoever uploads the artifact writes the description. So this will have a little icon that makes it look more like Joe Blow uploaded this, right? So this is her point of view or his point of view, and it will be clearly identified as, this is background information that's been supplied by the person who uploaded it.
Is it like a Facebook?
It'll be like a little. It'll just be a little icon that looks like a Twitter account or a Facebook account, because there's no registration. We're not really able to register. We don't really even want to do that, right? Okay. So it'll just look like something. It'll be an example of, and then this is propaganda because. So those three things are what we're asking people to do when they upload propaganda.
Renee, let me ask, who are these people? Are we talking teachers or students? And another question is, who is the target grade? What's the target grade level? Are we talking 5th grade and up? Are we talking just middle school? Are we talking just high school?
Yeah, great question. I mean, that is a question that I think I don't know the answer to. In my mind, the target audience is students in grades 9 through 12 and university. And the only way to reach them is through their teachers, primarily their social studies teachers and possibly their English teachers. So a sense of how this will be used is probably by English and social studies teachers in the context of a lesson on either history and propaganda in history, kind of making contemporary connection that way, or in some kind of English class where communication and media are part of the conversation.
So let me ask another clarifying question. So if world history and the Holocaust are touched on in middle school, would you not want to include middle school?
Really interesting point. You know, I think that's worth a discussion because these issues are really relevant to kids 12 and up, 12 and 13. One of the things I am a little bit concerned about is this is going to be a robust site with a lot of actually deeply problematic kinds of messages, right? A lot of evil, or not necessarily evil, but a lot of evil, a lot of good, a lot of strong stuff. So I guess we will have to probably work that through in the next 2 months about our own editorial position on, are we making this appropriate for children that are 12 and 13 years old. So I'm glad you're asking that question, Frank. That's a very insightful point.
I don't want to leave anybody out. So what I know is that there are thousands of images on Google and elsewhere of propaganda posters and propaganda parody. So as I understand your site right now, it is mostly analysis. Are we going to give students, teachers, opportunities to create propaganda on this site?
What we might do is have lesson plans that invite students to do that, and then if you want to create propaganda and upload it to our site, you could, right? Yeah. But the site is really a gallery of propaganda, and it can come from anywhere, including made by teenagers. And that's an interesting idea. When we look at our lesson plans, that might be something to take on. So in a way, we have a little bit of a moving target around this open question of, are we interested in kids younger than 14 in our project? But now let me take you back to the website because I want to walk through all the pieces of it before we look at the Google Docs.
Okay.
So you see the idea is, thank you. So you see the idea is, if I go to this website and I take a look at that image, I get to decide if it's dangerous or not dangerous, and then as soon as I evaluate it, I get some feedback from how other people have evaluated it.
98% non-dangerous.
Yeah, and then I'm gonna put on I'm gonna make a comment, and it will basically show my email and my name. You can see me typing here, and I'm going to make a comment here. Okay, now that one's guaranteed not to get published, right? That basically goes into a database, and the message pops up. Thank you for your comment. We will email you when your submission has been approved and is publicly posted to the site. How come we're using that method as opposed to any other method?
Well, you want to facilitate, you want to moderate the discussion so you don't get crap, obviously.
Exactly. Yeah, that's really it. We learned this from My Pop Studio, Frank, when we started My Pop Studio in 2006. It was an open forum, and it quickly degenerated into a cesspool. So we had to figure out how to moderate and do moderation, and that's going to be something we work through as we develop the site. But in some ways, it's going to inspire us to get out on the road and show it to teachers so that we get some activity like that.
I'm sorry. I need to pause for this product placement.
See, I would call that beneficial propaganda. Nicely done, Frank. Nicely done. What a pleasure. Okay, let me just show you one more. Jesus, God. Let me just show you one more part of the website, because in a way this part I think is really to me what's intriguing. So then after you've done that, you'll be able to go to the gallery. Now this gallery is going to look a lot different. I've asked the web designer to remove all of the words. All of these words in the white letters that say attacks opponents, rated 70% dangerous, rate and discuss, all that is going to go away. The only thing that will stay is
rate and discuss.
And maybe even that could go away with the idea that you logically will know to do that by clicking on it. Because I believe if you click on the image, you get to it. And I don't know whether or not that's obvious. Anybody want to share an opinion on this? Should the words rate and discuss be there? Or is it obvious that at a gallery where there's images, you click on the image and go there?
I think it's obvious that you click on the image. Also, is it easier to track what images people are clicking on if they're doing that directly? Because you might, even though they don't engage when they get there, you would want to know if 50 people clicked on it, and then they didn't engage when they got there.
Right. Either way, that's a good point. Either way, when they show up at a site, we'll know. If they click on it, we'll know whether they hit the icon or the rate and discuss. It's really like a question of, it's almost like it's the digital literacy of the audience. If you came to a gallery site like this that just had images, would you know to click on one? Or maybe at the top it says, click on an image to rate and discuss.
Or click on an image to bring up a larger version.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Click on an image to enlarge. Ooh, that's very nice. Okay, so we're going to put on our list of topics to talk about with David Clevin, his thoughts about that. Now let me take you to the For Teachers page. This site has just four simple chunks: the project rationale, the learning outcomes, the how to use the site in the classroom, and the lesson plans. We're going to revise those. And then it has this pull-out, propaganda techniques. And I've recently learned that we can have more than 4, because I was hoping we could have more than 4, but we have to. Our team is going to discuss and decide how many of these techniques is appropriate for this project, and how do these things. What's the function of these techniques?
I'm sorry. Is there a link? Is there some verbiage which links to McREL standards or the National Social Studies standards or National English Teacher standards yet?
I think that's something we want to create, Frank. What a great idea. Let's make sure we have a PDF link that shows how these lesson plans are aligned with at least Common Core and McREL, because you're right, Common Core doesn't have history in it, does it?
It does have some history. It does have some history.
Okay, good. So I like that idea that when we look at the lesson plans, we will include a standards alignment, and that's something that we will create. Before we go to the actual Google Docs, where we review where we're at and what we need. Basically, that's the next step of this conversation, which is here's what we have, and here's what needs to be. Here's what we need. Before we do that, any comments or questions on how we can help this project to be successful? What we should be thinking about? What you're thinking about as you're, as you're in this conversation?
Obviously, you want teachers to use it, but probably not until you've rolled it out
Right.
after October 31.
Right.
Are you looking to recruit some specific teachers who would incorporate it into instruction this school year?
Yep. I think the idea is we'll try to target, we don't need a whole lot, but it would be nice if we could have a few teachers explore it in November and December, and it would be nice if we did a full-on campaign in January for the spring semester. So I am kind of imagining that some of the materials we're going to create are literally a promotional campaign, right, about this site. And we'll probably need to use video, and we'll need to use social media. I like the idea, Frank, that you and I might do a webinar on this topic, right? And we demonstrate it, and our communities come because they like us, and the media literacy people come because they like us. So I think a webinar makes a lot of sense. I think timing we'll have to think about, because maybe we wait until January or February when we've had a chance to beta test the site in the winter, right, before we do a big promotional thing of something that's not quite working, right?
And Renee, you know what I would love to see us do, and I think it's extremely doable. I love to put a camera in a classroom with a teacher that you and I either both know or trust, and watch him or her not only project it, but take students through an analysis of a particular image, and have a relevant and rigorous conversation. And it's so you take a little 5-minute video clip, and so that other teachers see a peer incorporating this into what they're doing. I think what's really missing for me in media literacy and visual literacy is I want to see another educator doing it.
I'm really keen on the video documentation thing, Frank. I think that's a wonderful idea. Do you have a social studies teacher in Columbia or the environment who would feel comfortable if you came in and video documented? Do you know such a talented teacher?
I want to tell you briefly about Perry McLeod, who teaches social studies at Richland Northeast High School. He is a multiple national Apple Teacher of the Year. His real expertise is in having his students do digital stories with World War II veterans.
Ooh, cool.
I could walk up to him tomorrow morning, and he'd say, "I'm yours," and not a problem to be videotaped. His kids have been videotaped anyway, so we'll approach him at the right time whenever we're ready to do this.
Nice, and that's, I think, I like the idea that we use an experienced teacher who's really comfortable and who gets this in a deep way. So now that we're brainstorming those people, I am thinking that our friend Dave Hickman, who worked with us on the Turkish Cultural Understanding Project, he's teaching 7th and 8th graders, so that might be a good test of this question that you've opened up, which is, does this work with younger students? That's excellent. I love the idea of doing some kind of video documentation. I love the idea of making that part of, it's interesting, if we did that in the late winter or the early spring, we could incorporate some of that video into our webinar and maybe even do like an interview with the teacher. You're right, that'd be a spectacular form of professional development, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and if I know Perry, he would even be open to writing about it, the experience for social education or English Journal, however you want to promote it.
Hey, so what say you to the idea that we develop a small select advisory group on this?
It works.
Right? And it becomes, and then I do a formal invitation email, right? You know, and it becomes our kind of, you know, they become our gold standard folks to review stuff and then to help us promote and to distribute. I think for the true believers who really care about this topic, they would be thrilled to be invited.
I want to throw another idea out at you, and you can kill me for saying this, but this idea of ramping up teacher education, teacher awareness, student awareness of this topic, I think demands an iBook or an ebook down the road.
You know, Frank, it's really interesting because maybe even not down the road. One of the things that because of the way we inherited this project, the only way the lessons will be delivered is with a downloadable PDF, right? So that's basically what will happen. You'll click on the lesson plan, click, and boom, the PDF will open. And that's good for lots of things, but you're right that an ebook allows us a little bit of flexibility around directly addressing students in ways that the PDF lesson plan does not.
How about non-print? How about moving images? How about
right?
You know, let me just fantasize for a moment. We put a camera behind a graphic designer and watch him or her develop a professional propaganda poster. So we see it in development. You know, we never. Here's another thing that I say, Renee, when I teach advertising. You know, I say, hey kids, we're going to get in the school bus and we're going to take a field trip to the ad agency. We never do that. We never take kids to show them this world of advertising that's around us, that is multi-billion-dollar business. We never show kids how ads are created. You know, and watching Mad Men, I'm sorry, it does not count. Okay, but. I've always wanted a book that says, I got an idea for a product, and I walk into an advertising agency, help me create the campaign for my, for my thing, right? And what are the questions that they're going to ask you, and who are the people involved? How does the product move from inception to completion? I think that's a fascinating process, and nobody knows how it works because it's advertising is such a closed-door society. So why not see if there's somebody creating what we call, Renee, you told me in Providence about the recruitment ad as propaganda. Well, who creates that? Right. You know, who is the one saying what are the images and the words that we know are going to persuade? Who is designing this to take advantage of where your eye goes on the page? And why is there a URL there? And what's the motivating factors? You know, these are the things that interest me that I think this project that has moving image. And I only say this, Renee, because I've just finished my own iBook on the great blue heron. So I've been shooting photos for 3 years. So they said, give us a manuscript. I said, well, shit, now I got to go out and shoot video. So for the last 6 months, I've been shooting video of great blue herons and flying and the nest and the bags and the da-da-da-da-da. You know, you got to have supporting material to make your iBook interesting, right? You know, so that's why I suggest an iBook or an ebook, because most of what you're saying is most of this is static. It's print. There's nothing wrong with print, but we're in a non-print world, and kids want to be engaged. And so, you know, could we have eventually there's a propaganda student video competition? You know.
One of the reasons why I'm really intrigued about this is because I've been wanting to teach a educational multimedia class, and now that I get to teach, it might be possible in this, even as early as the spring semester, to organize a undergraduate class around that theme, and then put the undergrads in charge of helping us build the elements for that iBook, Frank. And you and I are inherently demystifiers, so we're in good alignment around what a iBook would need to cover if it were to go behind the scenes. And I also like the idea that a behind the scenes approach transforms this negative connotation of the word propaganda, which I've been, if there's anything that keeps me up at night, it's like, you know, nobody wants to own this word. So for me trying to reclaim it, it seems kind of arrogant, right? But we could reclaim it if we go back to Eddie Bernays, the founder of public relations, who said that's what it's called. Like, so just, you know, don't be ashamed of it. Be proud. Be proud to call yourself a propagandist if you are a propagandist for a good cause. And let's go behind the scenes and see the critical thinking and the creativity and the manipulation that is part of the business. I think that's a very intriguing idea. I'm thrilled that you might be game for that, Frank, and I think given that I've had no experience making an iBook, but since you have, that like increases my confidence that that might be something a way we could repackage and extend the learning here. And then that solves another problem, which is then it gives teachers, beyond these little lessons, it could give like actually a more robust, give a teacher a motivation to spend a longer period of time doing a deep dive on this topic. Because right now, I don't think we're imagining this as much of a deep dive at all, but it could be, right? It could be. So,
Renee, when I hear you talk about this project, and I know the other projects that you've undertaken over the years, like copyright, I'm proud that you've seen what's not happening in education and how to fill a void.
Yeah.
And this is one of those fill a void opportunities. You know, why is this taking this back seat?
Right.
And what can we as media educators do to elevate this topic in the minds of teachers, and not only teachers, you know, policymakers and others. And so it disturbs me to see that even the word propaganda does not exist in today's standards.
Right.
Did you know that?
Right. It's ironic because we are the largest purveyor. I mean, if in terms of, you know, the world domination, we are the largest purveyor of it. But we can't own it. We can't introduce it. It will be interesting to see how this idea is, how the news literacy people make sense of this. And I'm going to, in a very gentle way, try to interrogate that a little bit because. If we did an iBook, it would be nice to find a philanthropic supporter who is aligned with our mission and vision, who could support that, right? And I think we can spend some time, maybe next weekend when we're in Chicago, Frank, we can spend some time thinking about what would be the approach to a funder for the iBook version of this, because we will have a very nice website to show them, right?
Listen, all I want to do is camp out on George Lucas's doorstep. That's who I want to approach.
Okay. I have some, Frank, I want to reflect kind of what I heard you saying. So I was thinking when you were talking about the documentation of film, I was thinking about the biggest film ever sold, the Spurlock, Morgan Spurlock.
The greatest movie ever sold.
Yeah.
Right?
So, but then I was thinking, and I heard you talking also, so he did more for entertainment, but to reveal in a kind of a media literacy way, but you were talking more like doing an educational sections to be embedded in the iBook, if I understand correctly what you were saying. So targeted more to educational purposes, but also I was confused a little bit about our definition. Are we talking about advertising, native advertisement, or are we talking propaganda? So Renee, you're saying you want to own the word propaganda, but I feel a little bit kind of confused. When are we talking about advertisement? When are we talking about propaganda? Is there a difference or not?
Good, good, good. So glad you're bringing that up. That's a good segue for us to go to the Google Docs, because that is absolutely the next phase of what we need to be talking about, and we need to discuss how and whether we. Let me just go to the Google Drive.
You have here. That's the email.
The website with the website with the links. I think I might have introduced you to these Google Docs, but
Yeah.
maybe
I
not.
have.
Yes, you did.
Okay, so let's go to the Google Docs and let's look at the one that says Learn. The Learn Propaganda one.
The teachers?
Yeah, there you go. Good show.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Uh,
All right, switch accounts. There you go.
no.
Request
Won't work.
access.
No. It won't
So
work. Put it
I'm-
on your computer.
Yeah, let me pull it up on my computer. Lily, can you see it on your computer?
I have a
You have it?
Those documents right now.
Learn Propaganda.
No, but
Frank,
you
can
can share
you
the.
can you find
the
it on your
screen.
computer?
I think so.
Okay, so we're the only ones who aren't. I'm just going to open it up on mine right now. I would just love in the little roundtable way that we're working for each of you to respond to the 4 definitions that we've put at the top of that document. So why don't Lily? Why don't you talk us through your sense making when you see those 4 definitions? What is going through your mind? Which of those definitions do you like or dislike? What are you thinking about as you see those 4 definitions?
For me, I just keep seeing the word.
Oh, okay, good. Frank, can you hear her?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good.
Okay. So I just keep looking at the words influence and thinking about how much this is just changing the perspective. So it's keeping you where you are and then changing the way that you're seeing things. That's how I interpret these. And for the most part, they all allude to that. I think one of them I did kind of trip over. Let me look real quick. I think it was the last Neil Postman one, that, you know. But otherwise, they all really do speak to just
Influence.
influence.
Influence is a big theme. Frank, when you look at these 4 definitions, what goes through your head and what do you like or dislike about these definitions? When you read these definitions, what jumps out to you?
Well, I like the Nelson definition a lot, and Renee, I kind of like this because on the top of my own webpage on propaganda, I had similar quotes, not only from people just like this, but from some news sources. So I've got a definition from Clamor magazine. May I just read it?
Sure.
You might have in my web. It says propaganda is not the same as advertising or art. Art today is preoccupied with abstract ideas. Advertising tries to get you to buy something. Propaganda, on the other hand, is interested in making you believe something. It is the stronger societal force. Once you start believing in an idea or ideology, you will buy anything, metaphorical or literal. It tries to sell you. Once the public was scared into believing Iraq was trying to acquire weapons of mass destruction, they didn't seem to mind that they were being fed lies over and over. Untruths and misleading statements were quickly accepted as reinforcement and justification for a particular point of view, even when proven false. Propaganda is that strong. So that quote alone is actually rather dated because you can tell where it came from. But I think to me it's very important to look at current events. Who is today writing about propaganda? I've taken this tack on my own website. So I have a website about advertising. Who's writing about advertising? If a teacher's going to teach about advertising or propaganda, I would want them to have some reading, and I think you would agree with me, Renee, some kind of reading that would give students some kind of background. And so I think
Absolutely.
on this website or even on an ebook, you have someone writing about contemporary propaganda that we may not even recognize as propaganda.
Yep.
And so I happen to like that quote, and you're welcome to pull anything off my website and use it for this one.
You are a sweetheart. One of the things that's interesting about the Clamor quote is this idea of belief and believing. That really taps into another theme in the definition of propaganda, which is values. So Lily identified that influence is a common and an important theme. And Frank, you have identified that propaganda is about values. right? Making you believe something. Propaganda is tied really directly to deep values in a way that, say, for instance, information is not, right? So we can use that concept of values in a way in thinking. Jonathan, talk to me about your reaction to these 4 definitions of propaganda. What sticks out to you, or what do you like or dislike about them?
I was looking at outcomes. So so I think I can identify propaganda, I think, but what does it want me to do, or what does it want the consumers? So the Alan Nelson definition brings the emotion, attitudes, opinion, and action. So those are the 4 things that kind of looking to influence. So that was what I was looking at, because the advertisement is very easy. I need to buy something. And so here, that's the thing that I see as different.
Yeah, very nice. The outcome. So there's another big theme, which is propaganda is designed to get results. And the results might be a change in, or an activation of emotion, an activation of attitude, of behavior, but that there is always an outcome. And that's also the case that for information, that is not always, an outcome is not always planned, right?
Yeah.
When you provide information, you don't necessarily have an outcome that's intentional on the part of the author. So the idea that an outcome that is planned and intentional on the part of the creator is a huge defining characteristic of propaganda.
Renee, can I back out a little bit wider view? You've given us some definitions of propaganda, but on the learning page for this website, I'd like to see the teachers not giving definitions, but asking students to define in their own words what they believe or understand propaganda to be. I do this in my media literacy workshops. I ask the participants, teachers or students, to write a definition.
Yeah.
I want to know what they think it means, and I have to tell you, maybe you've experienced this too, there is so much confusion over what that phrase means, even though it's changed over time. A lot of people think it's information literacy. So having students define the word, the way they understand it, and the way they misunderstand it, I think is quintessential. And,
I love that.
And look at our standards. Again, traditionally propaganda is relegated to World War I or World War II, and that's not even covered anywhere else in the disciplines outside of those world wars, which is unfortunate.
Yep. I'm really glad that I like the idea of write a definition being a part of lesson 1, and I also am really clear that I'm not going to provide the definitive definition. We got a lot of traction actually asking teachers, when we did the trainings for the Holocaust Museum, we had a very robust discussion about, and there's a lot of controversy associated with what people think propaganda is. So I like starting with this idea that the word is mischievous, right? And the word has a bunch of different definitions, and we're not going to control the definition. We're going to help you understand that at different points in time and in different contexts, people understand the word differently, but that for us, big ideas are influence, values, outcome, maybe intentionality. Our curriculum's going to have a bias, right? We're going to have a preferred meaning, right? And we'll co-construct that together. But I feel like in some ways, for us to create something with a shared set of values, we kind of need to have conversations about this, which is why I want to turn to the next section of that Learn page, which is the Recognizing Propaganda section. Only 2 days ago, there were 4 items on this, and when the website guy told me, oh, there could be as many as you wanted, I went overboard. Now I have to roll David in our conversation, so I'm going to just invite him. I'm going to invite him to participate. So why don't you guys talk to me about what's those bulleted lists? What that bulleted list? What ideas stick out? What ideas do you have problems with? What's your interpretation of those items, Frank?
Well, I want to go back to some words that look new to me and might be new to students or teachers. Words like novelty, words like polarize, and to make sure that they are defined early on in this process. I don't want to assume my audience understands what is a value, what is a desire, because they may not know those things. And so when I look at this bulleted list, I want to, in my ebook for the Great Blue Heron, Renee, I actually bolded words in the ebook, and when you touch the bolded word, it brought up a definition that I wrote. It didn't take you to dictionary.com. It brought up a definition that I wrote. So if I wrote rookery in my book and you touched it, it brought up a location where birds nest and breed.
Nice. Nice. I like the idea of that there are some words in those definitions that do need definition. That is superb. Okay. Am I declining, right?
No.
I'm answering.
I muted myself.
Okay, so sorry about that. I just added myself to the call so that I can reach out to David Clevin, who's going to be joining us. So Frank's made a really good point about that bulleted list has words in it that need to be unpacked. Lily, when you look at that bulleted list, what sticks out to you?
I keep thinking about the word attitude, and I don't see that there. I'm trying to see what it relates to.
Good point. Where is the word attitude? So the idea is this list of techniques is designed to increase your awareness of what propaganda looks like, right? And so techniques may not be evident because, or influence might not be evidence because this is actually folks. Oh, see, David said, hold on, I'm going to just send him the link to click on. Click here to join the Hangout. I want you guys to meet David because he's really why we're here and what the project is all about. And before we get too far along, I want to kind of honor his contribution and have us feel his his vision and mission. Now, that being said, Jonathan, I want to get the URL to this Hangout. And there's a way to do that, right?
Yeah.
Go to invite.
Go to invite. Why is that not working?
Okay.
So maybe just send me the, because you started this call, so I don't think I have the power to do that.
Okay.
Right? Only you can do invite. But send me the link to the live Hangout. I'll tell you the one that I'm really intrigued about, and that is this either-or thing, Frank. Do you see the list that I reread Neil Postman as preparation for this meeting, and that's part of the work that I've done so far. And I really like this idea that intentional polarization reduces cognitive complexity and thereby creates a receptivity. Because you know what? We all are seeking to reduce complexity. That's just the human brain wants to do that. So I like the idea, and I do that as a teacher myself, right? I intentionally polarize to use the Socratic method and to, sort of invite students to kind of come into the gray area by intentionally polarizing, make them come into the gray, right? So it is a rhetorical tool of great power and sophistication. I like the idea that the techniques we identify become like flags. And if you see that, that's like a flag that it's probably propaganda, right?
At this stage, Renee, are you helping to provide. I mean, this is just me as Frank Baker, educator. So activating emotions. Frank Baker wants to see right now an example of that. Before I even read bullet point 2, I need to see, what do you mean activating emotions? Are you talking about the Fox News commentator who starts to scream at someone he's interviewing? Example, I mean, or are we talking about someone who makes us laugh at a message? When you say activating emotions, again, as an educator, before I could use these, I would want to show my audience 1 or 2 examples before I move forward.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Frank, because that's the idea. The gallery will have examples of these so that when you click on either or thinking, those examples will pull up in the gallery. And our job is to choose those examples, like what best exemplifies. So you've given us 2 examples of either or thinking that if we do use that as a rhetorical technique, we could pull those examples up, right? The talk show shouting match, for instance. You want to keep going on that while you're doing that? Walk us through some other examples that you think we might want to pull up or find.
It just makes me think that all of our news, national network cable news, is moving in this direction.
Right.
Even CNN, which is so last in the ratings, is starting to look like Fox News because everybody is conflictual. And I can't follow a newscast in which the moderator or the facilitator and the guests are talking over each other. It's such a turnoff. But apparently there must be some research in the news business that says this attracts an audience, and this bothers me. And when you and I get to Chicago to this News Literacy Institute, are they going to talk about what's wrong with the news? What's turning people on?
What do you think, Frank? Are they going to talk about that?
Of course not.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I think they're going to talk about the good old days when journalism was pure and wonderful, and that's what.
And that's the way it is. December 12th, 1968.
I have a feeling that many journalists are going to be offended if we claim that the talk show on CNN is propaganda. And I feel like, in a way, I'm all on for that, Frank. I'm all on for that. I don't have a problem being that kind of courageous. Is not a problem for, I think, either one of us, right? And everybody in the room, right?
I think what you're trying to do here, and what I'm trying to do in my own work, is what I call pull back the curtain to a process of how is the news put together? How is propaganda put together? So by my suggestion, putting the camera behind the graphic designer, I want to see him or her go through a process, because you know what I say, our kids see the final product, but they never see how that production got made. So they see the propaganda poster or they see the advertisement, but they never see who is making the decisions here.
Yeah, great point. And now I see David Clevin has joined us. David, welcome to the call. Can you test your microphone and we can see how you sound?
Sure. How do I sound?
You sound amazing.
Well, awesome.
David, let me introduce you to Frank Baker, media literacy guru extraordinaire from Columbia, South Carolina. Lily Schleicher, a MA student in Communication Studies, just graduated from Webster University in St. Louis, and now happily a team member at the Media Education Lab. Jonathan Friesen, the Associate Director of the Media Education Lab and a doctoral student in education at URI. And we have been having an amazing conversation for the last hour about why we care about teaching and learning about propaganda.
Great.
And so what we're hoping to do in the next half hour or so is get your vision for what this was supposed to be, because I actually really do, David, I feel very honored that we're able to carry out the vision that you had for having a interactive multimedia platform for discussions of contemporary propaganda. This was your idea, and you spent 2.5 years or more on it, and I feel like the vision of the site is your vision, and I want to make sure our team embodies that vision as we carry it forward. And so if you can talk a little bit about why this topic matters to you, what was your design process as you imagined it, and what you hope that could be accomplished as this site moves into, becomes a reality in the contemporary version of it becomes a reality. I'd be really grateful if you can talk us through that.
Okay. I'll see if I can do it concisely. First of all, first I'm going to ask Renee if you can mute your speakers because I'm hearing feedback. All right, let's see. Yeah, that's better. Good. All right, everybody can still hear me, right?
Yes.
All right. So the original vision for this site was an extension of what we sort of internally call our propaganda initiative, which is the museum launched this exhibition, State of Deception, The Power of Nazi Propaganda, but it was part of a larger initiative where we really wanted our audiences, the public, to go beyond just the history of the Holocaust and Nazi propaganda, but to think critically about the nature of propaganda and media that they're exposed to in their contemporary lives. And this approach was somewhat new for the museum. And so when we decided to do Mind Over Media, really what my vision was to create an opportunity for learners. And in my case, that means primarily thinking about middle school and high school students, though clearly we have expanded this to university and to people of all ages. We wanted them to look around them and recognize where propaganda was around them in their everyday life and try to assess the impact that it may be having. And so the original challenge for us was, how do we bridge the history to the current day? How do we take something that feels so completely foreign in so many ways, like Nazi propaganda, and provide a framework in which learners could understand the techniques that the Nazis were using, understand that as horrible as some Nazi propaganda was, that these techniques were not invented by them. Most of these techniques were nothing new, and view it as part of a continuum. And in trying to assess what makes propaganda dangerous, we wanted learners to consider the context, the propagandists themselves, the way in which they disseminated the propaganda, the techniques they used, and all of those factors beyond just the message as to could this have a potentially harmful effect on society. And the way we got to where we were was, this was a lot to do in one website, and considering the fact that any, short of a coercive environment like a classroom, if you ask students to do learning online, it really has to be a self-motivated experience. It has to be something where they're doing something that is fun enough that they'll want to do it and that they'll motivate themselves. And so that was part of the rationale also for asking students to look around them in the world today, find things that they thought might be propaganda, and try to explain to each other why they thought it was. And it's part of why we came up with a somewhat kitschy rating system, from not dangerous to dangerous. We wanted something that required minimal amount of effort and providing layers of involvement for learners. So those who just wanted to rate things and browse things could do that very easily. Those who wanted to go a little bit deeper and leave a comment could. The new site will have the potential for folks to also rate each other's comments, similar to how you would in Amazon or on YouTube. We also then wanted the opportunity for folks to go even deeper and upload their own content. So that was how the site evolved. Ultimately, and I'm sure Renee probably shared this with you, that ultimately we ran into challenges internally about where the museum was comfortable going, and differences in how staff and council members and others viewed the breadth of our mission. And eventually it was decided that if we were going to do this site, if we were going to look at contemporary propaganda, that the council was more comfortable with us focusing on issues directly related to what they view as the museum's core mission, which would be propaganda relating to incitement to genocide, hate speech, anti-Semitism. And at the same time, there was deep discomfort with propaganda that directly attacked individuals or countries, particularly political figures. And as you can imagine, that pretty much meant that we would have been dealing with shampoo commercials. So we decided that it would really have enough of a chilling impact on what we were able to do that it was better for us to focus our efforts on education about Nazi propaganda and helping students to understand propaganda techniques and the impact of propaganda by looking at the history, and that we needed to find a good partner who could host a site looking at contemporary propaganda, who would be more comfortable opening themselves up to examination of very controversial topics, and who was willing to absorb a certain amount of risk that we weren't, and whose mission was broader than ours, frankly, and that learners would understand that I think a lot of learners might have trouble making that leap from the history to the current day and understanding why that would be part of our mission, or at least certainly the council was concerned about that. Whereas with the Media Education Lab, it's a natural fit. But one of the things that I think you will still grapple with, and it's important for us to really hash through, is how do you maintain how do you keep learners focused on the use of propaganda, the nature of propaganda, and keeping them from getting caught up in the polemics of the message. In trying to assess whether a piece of propaganda is beneficial or harmful, or what impact, if any, it might have on society, we found that one of the big challenges is getting learners past the actual bias of the message, in that if you're pro-life, it's difficult to get past the idea that any pro-choice message is dangerous, or vice versa. And so trying to get learners to focus on, well, what's the technique being used? What's the overall context? Who's the audience and who's the propagandist? Trying to get them to focus on those things can be very, very difficult if all they see is the power of the message itself, and they know that they're opposed to it. So I think that at the end of the day, that trying to figure out how you create an environment in which teachers and students can really get to that point, even with the site we've worked on here, that's going to be challenging. As part of why, for the site that we're producing that you will host, it's part of why we really wound up creating these classroom galleries, because teachers know their students better than we do. Teachers know their parents and administrators better than we do, and so we wanted to give them the power to go through all the different types of stuff that would be housed in the site gallery and choose ones that they think are useful, that where students won't get bogged down in the controversy of the message. So Renee, I can't hear you because you're still muted.
So I'm really grateful for you to introduce that, because I haven't yet had a chance to talk to the team about that, David. You introduced a couple of new things that are going to be in the new site. I just gave them a tour of the current site as our part of our kickoff meeting. I didn't mention first that people will be able to rate the quality of the comments, which is awesome. And I didn't mention the idea of the closed gallery, that teachers could, and this might help us come back to, Frank, the question you asked at the very beginning was, middle school kids, are they a target audience? And now I'm realizing, David, that that was part of your intention with the closed gallery, that would allow a teacher to pull from the web, from our gallery, which is going to have thousands of images, the 10 or 15 that are going to be talked about in the class that day or that week. And that gives the teacher a modicum of control, so the kids aren't surfing on finding the most egregious, emotionally evocative, problematic messages about gun control and then beating each other up over gun control instead of talking about propaganda. So I feel like that strategic shift in the way the new site will look is actually going to be really good for pedagogy and maybe create deeper teacher buy-in.
Yeah, that's absolutely what we were looking at. You'll find for high school classes it's the same thing. For teachers, it's not just trying to create the best learning environment for their students. It's also they're going to be sensitive to what they can or cannot discuss safely based on parental concerns, administrators, etc. And so when we did testing with teachers, that was one of the issues that came back. We were trying to figure out, were there things consistently that teachers would or would not want to touch, and both in a good way and also frustratingly, we found that there really wasn't. I mean, teachers generally were not going to touch issues related to sex and sexuality, though many of them were comfortable with gay rights, things like that. But anything that had to do just generally with sex, they were like, yeah, we probably wouldn't do that. Abortion, probably not. But interestingly enough, a lot of them weren't comfortable addressing propaganda around Israel, mainly because they felt that they didn't have enough knowledge themselves to speak intelligently about the conflict. It wasn't anything else beyond that. But again, each community is different, and so this was one of the ways we were addressing that. Oops, hold on. There we go.
So David, let me ask you a question, and then we're going to bring in Joanna into this call to talk about the experiences she's had doing education outreach with teachers, because we feel like, in a way, this initial kickoff meeting is really good to get a broad contextual understanding of what you've all learned plowing in this very deep field for as long as you have, then for us to come back and think some more about it and continue to meet about it, and then we might come back to you with some questions. Before you came on, we were having a conversation about how much of our contemporary American news is a form of propaganda. And Frank and I are about to go to a news literacy event in Chicago next week, so we were reflecting on how this work will be maybe perceived by the people in the news literacy community. Like you said, we're pretty clear that everybody's going to recognize that shampoo commercials are a form of propaganda because they are intentionally constructed to change behavior. And in every sense, advertising is absolutely the quintessential form of propaganda. I'd like to hear you talk about your own understanding about the definition of propaganda in relation to news. Can you talk us through that for a few minutes before we make the transition to meet with Joanna?
Sure. Actually, I think Joanna might be even the better person to talk about that, given the amount of time and energy she's put into the propaganda initiative. And I can give you my understanding, but I don't know that I can give you the museums. I don't know whether one has been articulated, and I think that's a great question for Joanna. My feeling is that when it comes to news, wow, it's complicated. Look, I was raised, like I think many of people of my generation, that news is news. That the goal of a reporter is to try to get as close to this magical place called objectivity as possible, and that's why you have news that's separated from editorials and opinion pieces. What we see in today's world is that there's a whole gamut, right? And especially with the rise of blogs and the fact that newspapers now have multiple blogs that they run, and for many people, myself included, we tend to read the blogs even more religiously perhaps than the so-called news articles, that the blurring between propaganda and news, I think, is a feature of everyday life right now. And on top of which, now with the internet, I have access to all sorts of stuff I didn't before. So when I'm reading about the crisis in Ukraine, I have information coming to me from Ukrainian blogs. I have information coming to me from Russian state media, and they both give totally different versions of what's happening, and ostensibly it's news. So Renee, I don't know that I have an answer for you other than yeah, that the news
Right.
is
propaganda.
It's well, I wouldn't say that news equals propaganda. I would say that the way in which news is reported can be used for propaganda. It was that question about bias, and that the discussion you and I had the other day about the issue with the museum's definition and the fact that we use the word bias, right? What you that bias comes in the second you decide what you're reporting as news. Before the headlines are written, before the article's written, a decision's made about what is news. And so depending on how broad your definition of propaganda is, that decision is de facto propaganda because you're deciding what people need to know about, and you're deciding that because you want to influence the way they think and perhaps the way they behave. Now, whether you've articulated, whether the editors have articulated in their head a clear thing that they want people to think or do based on what's being reported, that I don't know.
Now,
you're muted, so I can't hear you.
So what I really appreciate about that, and Frank, I will look forward to hearing your take on that, is that we just heard David refer to this concept of intentionality. Perhaps journalists aren't making propaganda because they're not intentionally aiming at a specific preferred outcome. Before I introduce Joanna, Frank, I'd love to hear your reaction to David's wrestling with the concept of the inevitable bias that happens when we construct media messages.
Well, Renee, all I could think about was writing. Who is writing the news? And the selection of images every night. And I go back to past Israeli-Arab conflicts in which photographers were brought into Lebanon, and amid the rubble they had placed Mickey Mouse stuffed toys. And so they brought AP and Reuters photographers there, and these were the images that were seen all over the world, and they had been manipulated. But how many people exposed to those images understood the manipulation? And so when I think about news, and I happen to have worked in television news myself, so I think about the words, the selection of images, and I go back to the gatekeeper. I worked as a news producer for 9 years at 5 TV stations. I was the one selecting the news every night at 6 or 11 that people would see. And so, you got this pile of news of which I'm deciding this is what I'm going to put into my 30-minute newscast, and this is what I'm not going to put in that. So understanding, I said this before you got on the call, David, the understanding the process. Our students see the final production, a movie, a sitcom, a propaganda poster, but they never see how it was put together. And so to me, pulling back the curtain on how these things are put together is so very important. So a web page that has students analyzing images is great, but I think I want to balance it with giving them, teachers and students, opportunities to create their own. And as we know in media literacy, analysis plus production is the highest form of media literacy pedagogy, and the new Bloom's digital taxonomy positions producing at the top of the higher order thinking skills. So I'd like to see that be part of this page.
Frank, I really appreciate those comments. And David, I noticed that in the group chat you have identified a Learn More link for us to look at. I really thank you for that. Joanna, I can't see you, but I guess you're there. Can you unmute your microphone and introduce yourself to the team? I see she's there. I'm going to unmute her. Oh, I can't unmute her. She has to unmute herself. Oh, Jonathan, I think you have the override ability to unmute Joanna. Joanna, can you hear us? Maybe I'm going to try to call her on the cell phone on this.
While Renee is doing that, I just want to respond to what Frank said, which is that though the Mind Over Media site doesn't provide tools for students to create their own propaganda, there are a few opportunities. One is that they could a teacher could assign them to create their own visual propaganda and then upload it for others to comment on. But what I think would be more valuable, or at least equally valuable, would be in the lesson plans that you link to have that be one of the lesson plan ideas that you encourage for students or for teachers, because that's exactly where I think, I mean, on the one hand, we don't want to teach kids to make, harmful propaganda, but you're absolutely right. If you want to be able to influence what people believe, you have to learn to be a good propagandist yourself. So I agree 100%. I'm going to see if I can help Joanna out. Renee?
Actually, what we found out is Joanna's computer doesn't have a microphone or a webcam, but I have her here on the mobile. Joanna, I want to introduce you. David is here, and Frank Baker from Columbia, South Carolina, the media literacy guru. My brand new graduate student, Lily Schlescher, recently arrived from Webster University in St. Louis, and Jonathan Freesom, the assistant director of the Media Education Lab, and my doc student here in the School of Education. Joanna, we're having our orientation meeting as we aim to put the contemporary propaganda website up, and we thought maybe in time for the October 31st anniversary of the War of the Worlds hoax, which we thought would be a nice timing if that worked out. David, I don't know if that works out, but it could, right? And Joanna, what we're hoping to do is talk with you for about 20 minutes or so about lessons you've learned in teaching about propaganda that will apply or be useful to us as we think about the contemporary gallery and the website here. So can you talk a little bit about what your learning curve has been like and what you think some of the key opportunities are for us as educators trying to address this issue?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, Renee, you've been with us there all along, and I apologize to everyone that I have all these technical limitations. I've never done a Google Chat before, so this is my first time figuring out that I can't do one. But in any case, I think, we've had 5+ years of working with this topic. I think people's perceptions naturally when they think about propaganda, and tell me if I'm repeating anything, I don't know, David, do you want me to come and use your headset? Anyway, so, I think people's perceptions naturally go to historical propaganda, bad propaganda, and deceptive propaganda. And there's a whole sort of veneer of negativity with this topic that needs to be unpacked, because I think a lot of people just kind of tune out automatically when you say the word propaganda, or they shut off. They think it's not something worth their time. They think it's not something that affects them. They think it's not something that they encounter in the world today. And so I think that that's just an obstacle that exists that needs to be overcome. And then, we have given a lot of time and energy and thought to sort of helping educators think a little bit more deeply about how to analyze propaganda. And one thing that we've learned is that it is a topic that teachers generally avoid, that they feel ill-equipped to manage the emotions and the kind of preconceived or the pre-existing beliefs that come along with looking at propaganda. So it is designed to, appeal, and it works based on pre-existing beliefs, right? So propaganda isn't going to convince you of something that you don't already believe. It's kind of bringing that to the forefront, what exists under the surface. And so I think a lot of teachers are concerned about talking about this topic because it will arouse conversations about beliefs and identities that they may not want to kind of get into. So that, I think, is also a really tricky challenge. And so what we've tried to do is to really think a little bit differently about how to analyze propaganda, how to provoke a deeper sort of discussion and analysis and critical thinking that helps us to think about how messages are constructed and why they work in the way they do at a particular moment in time. And to really reinforce the idea that propaganda never operates in a vacuum. It's always operating in conjunction with events that are happening in our culture, in our society, that affect the way that people receive the message. And so that's kind of where our new framework for thinking about propaganda came from. And I think and I hope that it helps people to get outside of their kind of automatic reaction to a message, to think about, why did this message resonate with the intended audience given what is happening at a particular moment in time?
In some ways, one of the things that's been so exciting and yet so challenging about thinking about the issue of contemporary propaganda is we are kind of stuck in time. In fact,
exactly.
One conversation we had is about, when we pull these examples, what do we mean by contemporary? Could I use something from 1989? Is that contemporary, or is that historical? And I feel like we probably have to draw some lines around that, but it sure seems like it's easier to understand context when you have history.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's maybe, when you think about exemplars, that are going to help people to think about contemporary examples, something that's not so historical as the Nazi era. For a student that's in second grade or fourth grade or whatever, 1989 is not something that they remember the context. So I think that it's important to think about, for a student that's in ninth grade that's studying propaganda, what's an example of propaganda that they would remember the context, but that they have a little bit of distance from. A teacher might remember 1989, but a student certainly won't. Doesn't mean you can't use those examples. It's just something to keep in mind.
It's really
and then I think you want to move to, okay, now that we've looked at that example from a context we remember but have some distance from, how can that help us to look at examples that we're seeing today and try and find some distance, even though we're very close to it.
Nice. So that would mean that if we were imagining our ideal target audience to be 9th and 10th graders, we can't go back much further than 2012, 2011. Okay, that's actually really insightful. Joanna, what I think we're going to do in the next phase of this project is we're going to continue to tighten up the writing that will appear and the design of the lesson plans. And we know that you've had a pretty good experience with the lesson plans that you created for looking at historical propaganda. Do you want to offer any reflection on? I thought the lesson plans that you designed were really terrific, and I actually am hoping we can kind of repurpose at least a couple of those to make a direct link. And after this call, we're going to look at those more carefully and talk about them. Can you share a little bit about why you think those lesson plans worked, what made them effective, and what you learned in the process of developing those pedagogical materials?
Sure. Well, I mean, the lesson plans, I think, were designed with a couple of different goals in mind, knowing that audiences will be teachers who are teaching history, who are teaching media, who are teaching English, that they may be using these for a lot of different purposes and in different settings and contexts. And so we designed them to be flexible. But for the purpose of this group and this conversation, I think our experience in developing the new framework for analyzing propaganda is probably the most useful, and I think can be translated to, that was sort of how it was designed, so that it can be translated to apply to examples that we encounter today. So that, I think, is something that can certainly be pulled out. And, I think that that's where using Mind Over Media is kind of a hook, to get students engaged, but it's very surface level. How can you then pluck the examples that students have uploaded onto Mind Over Media and engage with them more deeply? And I think that new analysis framework helps to get there. So that's one thing. And then, we did a lot of reflection and discussion about propaganda, and I think that also is something that's really important, is to kind of go beyond just critical thinking and analysis, but to really reflect on, what are the consequences of this? What could be the impact on my community, on my peers, on my society? And then we have our closing lesson really dealt with case studies of young people who encountered propaganda or hate speech and did something active to respond. And I think that that's a really nice place to leave students, because it empowers them to not just feel frustrated by problematic propaganda or propaganda they disagree with, but to actually do something active to respond to it. And so I think that those are, elements of the lesson plans that we have found to be effective, that are certainly going beyond the historical Nazi propaganda and can be applied to, examples that are uploaded by students in Mind Over Media, but if students and teachers want to go beyond that experience.
And what I love about that, Joanna, is that then connects to the deep issue of civic education, and that's a topic that I'm so glad, Frank Baker, that you are a partner in crime with us on that, because you've written so eloquently about that. That's a topic I know of great passion to you, and I feel like that if this project helps draw that thread back to the nature of citizenship and the need to respond to and confront this in an active and in a collaborative way with others, I think that's a value that we really do want to embody, I think, as a deep dimension of this, as propaganda education as a form of citizenship education.
And that's where I think, you could really go beyond what we've done to, political propaganda and organizing and, some elements that didn't feel like a fit for us, but for you, thinking about democracy and citizenship and all of those elements, I think that there are other examples of propaganda and also of response that certainly would apply and would be relevant and useful for students looking at them today.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's really right. Well, we have our work cut out for us, and I'm hoping, I think what's going to happen is we're going to be working pretty intensely over the next 60 days. We're going to be tapping into your expertise and your insight and your editorial guidance as needed. But at this point, I think we can let you go back to your work. Joanna and David, thank you so much for joining us for this part of the process. we're proud and humbled by the opportunity to play in this sandbox, and grateful to be able to continue to learn from you. So thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. It was our pleasure. Hey,
okay, cool. We'll talk to you again. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Renee, can I just, one last thing before I go, I just want to make clear, because I don't know if this is clear or not, that you do know that amongst the visual propaganda that Mind Over Media accepts, aside from photographs, it also accepts YouTube videos. Let's make sure your team knows that. Yeah, okay. That's it. It was nice meeting everybody. I'll see you around.
Okay, thanks, David. We really appreciate it. Frank, we're going to send you as an email attachment the print materials and the curriculum lesson plans that the museum created, and so that'll come to you in about an hour or so. I think at this meeting we're not going to drill down into the actual lesson plans themselves, but what I'd like to do in the next half hour, right, is simply kind of brainstorm a little bit of a to-do list and then figure out who wants to do what. So, because I do think that the way this project will work best is if we all do the stuff that either we want to learn how to do or we're already good at, or, you know, is stuff that we're going to enjoy. And I think that's why we came together, because we have different urgent tasks that need to be done, and we're going to do some divide and conquer and then come back. My guess is that we'll probably meet weekly for about the next 8 weeks, where we meet for an hour or so as a Google Hangout, we go back and make a to-do list and we get stuff done, and we come back and meet again, and that iterative process shouldn't take us much more than 8 weeks to get it where we need to be. So how about if Jonathan, can you do this? Can we start a Google, I guess I should probably do it. I'm going to start a Google Doc of a to-do list, and we can just basically start to throw up some stuff that is on that list. All right, so I'm going to create a document and share it with you a little bit, and then we'll just make a little to-do list. And give me a second here to make sure I can open it up, so that we're going to call this the to-do list for propaganda. Because we'll make a big long list and then we'll do a triage, right? And I'm going to make this so that anyone with the link can access it. And here it is. This is the link to share. Copy, and I'm going to Frank. If I pop it into the group chat, you can see it, right?
Hope so.
Okay, so if you guys can click on that link, let's just talk our way through the to-do list. I know that one thing that is really a very simple thing is that we need examples of propaganda, and the examples need to be illustrative of the concepts, the techniques that we're emphasizing. Okay, who's got another? That's one. What's another thing that we need to do?
Well, I'm going to add, and of course I would love to do this, is start the correlation to national standards.
Good. That document needs to be produced. Lily, what's something else that this project's going to need to do in the next 8 weeks?
Well, when you're talking about collecting propaganda, and then the end goal is that teachers can sort of pull these into a protected gallery, they'll all need to be categorized. So do we come up with that list ahead?
Actually, we need to have a final version of the, we're going to call that the techniques list. Right now, we don't have a final version of that list, but we need to finalize a version of the technique list so that we can categorize, right? And then once we have that list, then we can categorize the examples to align with the techniques. And one of the reasons why this is a little bit complicated is that good propaganda uses all of those techniques, right? And so it's a little bit arbitrary which one do we slot it into when it could actually fit in many places. Good. What else do we need to do?
Do we want to brainstorm the names of folks that you'd like to invite as your advisory group?
Good. Brainstorm names of people for the advisory group, committee, the advisory board. Excellent idea. What else do we need to do?
Design of the website. Like what you said, there are some changes we want to do. There's some link. There was some like new pages that Frank was suggesting. So get to kind of like what is the final.
So we are working with the website developer to finalize the website. Yeah, for sure.
Frank suggested his friend to go and videotape. I don't know if it's relevant now.
Video documentation of a teacher using the website in a class. Nice.
Lessons plan.
We need to create the lesson plans. We probably need to create a learn more something, a learn more list.
In that vein, we talked about having links, like bolded text that would link to definitions. So do we do that as we create this?
Let's just I'll put that under create the lesson plans, definitions for unfamiliar words. Good, what else?
I know it's not that relevant now, but we're getting to the due date. So think about if already we'll have conferences. So like for the spring, we have SITE, ISTE, those due dates are really getting closer. And think about the summer, Namely, and other places because NCTE, it's already
good point.
And South by Southwest, so places to advocate.
Good point. So plan to attend conferences in the spring and summer to submit something to 2015 conferences. So we're going to need to figure out where do we want to be. Frank, what do you say to the idea that we go to both NCTE next year and to social studies, you and me, and maybe our whole team on this?
I think it's quintessential not only to present, but I'd like to even suggest, Renee, that there's an exhibit table where the website is, on the screen, and I did it for South Carolina ETV. It's not enough to just present to 50 or 100 people. In 3 days, you could actually impact, hundreds more by having them come by your table, sign up for updates, whatever you want to build. You want to build the database of who is interested. I mean, I like the idea of not just presenting, but exhibiting as well.
Good, and so I put right underneath that we need to find a funder willing to support this initiative.
George Lucas. George Lucas.
You think George Lucas? Why?
He's just about ready to open his own museum in Chicago. Did you know this? Los Angeles lost out.
Yeah.
And here is somebody that I think really understands the power of telling stories through visual medium. Listen, if you're going to put together a formal request for funds, I would want his foundation to be a recipient of that request.
Okay, I know Milt Chen, and he's never done anything that's even remotely controversial, so I have a hard time imagining how he would respond to this, but you're right. George Lucas cares about media literacy, and you're right. He's got a reason to care about Chicago. Chicago's got McCormick, so we're going to have to think a little bit, Frank, about McCormick could be a funder. and we're going to see them next week. So we may do a little bit of brainstorming to see if we can tease about this in a way that maybe McCormick might, because $30,000 for McCormick would go a long way, and that's not a big deal for them.
So who do you want to invite to dinner next week in Chicago is really what we need to do, Renee, while we're there.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's actually...
I go back to lesson plans. Yeah, since I haven't really looked that deeply at the site, I'm going to assume there's already a template that Joanna has used in the writing of her own lesson plans. I've not looked at those, but do those specific lesson plans link to specific standards? Because I think teachers who are going to look at any lesson plan are going to want to know right away what standard does this lesson plan match. And do we plan to offer a lesson plan template that we want future teachers to use in order to submit future lesson plans?
I'm not crazy about the museum's template, so I think we should create our own, and I think I'm putting that on the to-do list, because you're right. That means that we could create a learning community. We put the first 6 lesson plans up, but then we invite our advisory board members to put up lesson plans, and that becomes that becomes part of the template. Well, then one question then about that is, where do these lesson plans live? Do these lesson plans, because they're not going to live on the Mind Over Media website.
Why?
They're not, because the financial dimensions of working with Night Kitchen are that they will make changes to the website that David Cleven just described, but we don't have any budget to add more to that. We could use either the Media Education Lab website, or we could use the Powerful Voices for Kids website, or we could create a new website that houses the lesson plans. Yeah, yeah.
To have them out there, I mean, would you want them to, like, is there a place for them to submit their email address to then receive them, like, as an email,
Right.
so you're actually generating a contact list?
Right. That's the idea. So the question is, how do we
Education Lab, a link on the Mind of the Media, so you can put like another section
Right.
there that you click and it will
join our
open.
learning community? Come here. Right.
No, link specifically lesson plan, specifically it will open
Right, to that page.
to that page, and whatever we want to do, we can
Right.
do on the Media
Right.
Education Lab
But
website.
Lily, you made a different point about something like a more of a community model.
Right, so then, I mean, I would love to say, oh, I'll just go download this PDF and go to my class and use it.
Yeah.
But we should put something in between there to capture them.
Yeah. Right. So the idea is that we're inviting them to join a community. We could do that through the Media Education Lab, because there's a click here to join the newsletter. We could also do that through Powerful Voices. We'll have to figure that out. Okay, so take a look at that to-do list. What are we missing? Oh, let's talk a little bit about, we probably are going to need a video. Jonathan, this is really on your to-do list, my friend, and it's a tight deadline too. We need a 2-minute overview video that lives on the home page. And we're going to need to script that and produce that by September 19th. Ah! Fortunately, we audio recorded this conversation today, which will give us many of the talking points we need. So I'm not too worried about that. I've also seen Jonathan produce a very, very fine video in 30 minutes. I once made my grad students produce a video in 30 minutes, and they did, but Jonathan's was amazing. So I know that if I left Jonathan in a room for an hour, he could make a really decent video on this topic all by himself. So we're good about that. Anything else that you think needs to be put on the to-do list? And then let's put some names associated. Let's put our names next to some of these projects.
Obviously, you can
Obviously, Frank.
You can put my name next to the standards. I've lost the document, so I'll have to pull it back up. And
right on.
There's something else here that I want to do. There's something else I want to do for you, Renee, and that's scratch your back, but that's not a to-do list. No. I'm going to work on the video documentation of the teacher using the website well, not using the website as much as I was thinking, taking an example from the gallery and engaging his students in a deconstruction and analysis. I think that's what you meant.
Ooh, I love that. And I've just put that, say that again, Frank. I want to write that down. That was good.
Well, I was envisioning that the video that I would shoot would be this teacher using a poster from the gallery and engaging his students in a deconstruction and analysis of the techniques, the words, the visuals, the layout.
And you know what, Frank? If you were able to do that promptly, which I don't know if you can based on your buddy, but if you could do that even just a little bit, that might be video we could use as B-roll in the intro video, right?
I'll work on it right now.
Awesome. Okay, so
I love it when you ask me if I can. Because I will certainly tell you if I cannot.
Cool.
Because I have to be honest with you because my name is Frank, not John.
Oh, Jesus.
I have to be frank with you.
Thank you for being frank with me, Frank. I really love that.
You haven't met my twin, John. You know I have a twin. His name is John.
Oh, I haven't met him. I knew you had a twin, but I never met that man. That would be intriguing. I like the idea that you're going to videotape a teacher using an image from the contemporary image, and we use a little bit. And then is it possible to use a little of that video in the overview video? Yes, if that's possible, boy, wouldn't that be nice. I'm putting you here under correlation to national standards. Lily, how about you? What's attractive to you here? Right?
Yes. And I don't know if I'm zooming in or zooming out for just a second, because what I heard in our discussion that we just had when everybody was on was that propaganda has to identify a current value or belief and leverage that. And I saw a little bit of that in Nelson's definition of propaganda, but not in the others. I don't see in the lesson plans that say what are the values and attitudes of the audience that are being addressed, because that's where a child is going to go, aha, and me too, right?
Nice.
And so I just want more of that.
So I'm going to put that idea, I'm just making a copy of, and I'm going over to the Learn document, because it may be, see the definition where the, number 2, there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 7 bullet points. The first one is activating emotions. The second one is addressing audience needs, values, and desires. You're saying that isn't very well written, and it needs to be better, right? Because it's actually tapping into existing.
Yeah. When they were talking about
leveraging,
doesn't work, I kept thinking, yeah, you've got to exploit something that's there already.
Nice. And you're saying that is a big aha, so let's make sure we keep it in the definition.
Yeah, because when I look at these kids, then a kid can go, oh, I
can identify based on
those values and realize.
Right.
Yeah.
If you could turn, Frank, could you turn to the Learn page? Because from my point of view, in this call, if we only have another 10 minutes, we've got a little bit of a to-do list and a sense of we're going to have to schedule a next meeting. But this list of 7 is too big. So Lily has just prioritized that the first one that's now at the top, leveraging an existing value of the audience, right? Or activating or whatever. Somehow that's going to be rewritten, but we get that that's a keeper, because that created a big aha, right? So if you were going to suggest that one of these ideas goes away, because maybe we need to get it down to 6, which one, or 2, or 3? Maybe we get it down to 4. What seems, for contemporary propaganda, what seems most easy to let go of?
Attacking opponents? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. Except, boy, we sure see that with the opinion politics and news. Although maybe attacking opponents and using either-or strategies is the same, right?
Well,
I want somebody to think that attacking opponents is always going to be
Right.
as common in propaganda. If you look at
Right.
propaganda.
It's not that common. Either-or strategies are more common than attacking opponents. How about to polarize or attack? Go ahead, say it, Lily.
The other thing, simplifying information ideas, I'm uncomfortable with that because sometimes it's the complicating of it that is affecting the attitude.
Good point. Yeah. So in a way, simplifying information or ideas, well, one of that is either-or strategies. So maybe simplifying ideas goes away. Okay. Frank, what do you think of that list?
I think it works. I'm just wondering, might folks come back and say, well, we're missing this one, and
Right.
I'm in favor of the longer list, but this is your project, not mine.
I like long lists too, and I like 7. 7 of anything is always a good thing, right? But I do feel like for instance, creating a sense of novelty or urgency, that works really well for political propaganda because we have an event, a vote. That really works well for advertising because we have a purchase decision, buy now. Creating a sense of novelty or urgency in news, I guess that also works because the news is timely, right?
That crawl at the bottom of the screen, breaking news. It's there all the time. This was reminding me to tell you, Renee, that I wrote in my book on media and politics, in the chapter on negative advertising, I was looking for an example in advertising, and I came upon Listerine in 1925, which used the slogan, "Often the bridesmaid, but never the bride."
Right.
Okay?
Uh-huh.
And what happened to sales of Listerine?
They
They
way
went through the roof.
Right.
And they used that same slogan all the way into the 1950s.
Wow. Because it was activating an existing fear of women, and it was tapping into that existing fear.
I don't want an old maid. It's my bad breath that's keeping me from getting a man.
Right. Boy, so that's really helping us see that the number one, Lily, which is the one you've invited us to rewrite. Now the question is how to rewrite that so that it taps into that idea that propaganda. Joanna said it really nicely in her talk. We might go back and look at the recording. She says propaganda never works unless it activates something you already believe in. Right? Now, one of the reasons why I put in activating peer pressure is because I've been doing some reading by some authors. There's a guy at the University of Toledo. He's a U of M graduate, University of Michigan graduate. He's got a kind of a goofy book called The 10 Commandments of Propaganda. And it has a lot of examples of contemporary propaganda. It's a very intriguing book. It's hilariously well written. He basically looks at the way in which propaganda is working in the social media arena and talking about how propaganda now is more based on the need to belong, right? And that the reason why that basically you'll put your pro-environmental or your anti-environmental propaganda on your Facebook page because you're displaying an identity marker that allows you to feel a sense of belonging to a group, and that belonging to a group is a natural human need, but it is also a very good way for propaganda to flourish. And I wanted to make sure that was in there because I'd like to make sure we don't leave out the way that social media is now becoming a tool. Like, I don't want to focus exclusively on mass media.
Right.
And I'm not sure that mass media activates peer pressure. I don't know. But I know social media does.
Sure.
So I think for that we're going to have to find screenshots of web pages. And I was thinking that would be another thing, Lily, up on your list of collecting. So we can collect video, we can collect screenshots of web pages, and we can collect images. And I think we could think about those 3 forms being a good focus for our work. So we want screenshots of web pages. We want YouTube videos, and we want now topics. If we were to ask Lily to go find examples of propaganda, we're trying to target the 12 to 17-year-old. What are the topics that we're going to ask her to explore? Lily, or what are you going to naturally gravitate toward in terms of finding examples of topics?
The first two things that come to mind in what we're talking about is the Ice Bucket Challenge and Hunger Games and Divergent.
Ooh, talk us through it.
Because, I mean, that age group has read those books and all the other books associated, and within those contexts there are propaganda that, because they apply to that world, it's a really safe thing to explore, right? Even though obviously we can draw conclusions that it's related to our world. And then with something like the Ice Bucket Challenge, like, God, I don't know if anybody's going to go, that's propaganda, but it is. Right? I mean, that's activating the peer pressure. It's really interesting. Those are just the two things that come up to the top of my head. So that's where I think it's fun, is to think of what others might not consider propaganda or have thought of as propaganda. But then, so knowing that that's the first two things that came to my mind, give me some direction on what.
Whoa, that's superb. Frank, contemporary issues since 2011 that you put out as topics for possible exploration.
All I can think about right now is the way these young people are marketed to through their clothes, their cosmetics, their music. So popular culture, sends messages out every day about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable.
Yeah.
So, pick up People magazine, pick up 17 magazine, pick up all of those things. The website, MTV. MTV's got a powerful series on teenage pregnancy. You want to talk about media influencing behavior? Don't we have some research now that says that entire series is a direct cause of the drop in teenage pregnancies?
Correct. 16 and Pregnant has created a decrease in teen pregnancy. Yeah, it's awesome. That's and that is an example of propaganda that some people will find benign, some people will find harmful, and some people will find beneficial. Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Okay, so I'm going to put Kony 2012, but the question is, will they even remember that? Is that too far away? Because that was a really good example of propaganda that was very well-meaning, right? But, complicated.
Okay, have you seen the brand new campaign that is going to shame celebrities who are smoking?
Oh.
This is the new Truth campaign. I saw the trailer in the theater the other day.
Nice.
And of course, it's still images, publicity stills of contemporary actors and actresses smoking, and it says, so we're going to shame the celebrities who are the spokespeople. They're the spokespeople for the tobacco industry because they've been smoking in the movies.
Nice, nice.
Nice, rich background there. And when I think about how do we reach young people, I think it's through the media that they are exposed to, the messages they're exposed to, and the counter advertising messages and the parody and all of that stuff. So,
Right. Love it, love it.
I like to go into a classroom and say, where is tobacco advertised in your community? Why is it there? Why is Cool Cigarettes only advertised in the African American community of Columbia? And it's all about understanding your audience and targeting them where they live. And what is propaganda? If not effective, if you don't know your audience and don't know how to reach them with the message using certain mediums and formats, right?
Yep.
And to me it's just like advertising. I want to advertise this, right? So I got to know who my audience is, and I got to know what they read, what they listen to, what they watch, what car they drive. It's like the politicians who know what TV show. The Democrats watch West Wing, and the Republicans watch Homeland or whatever.
I feel like in some ways we are going to have a pretty rich story to tell to our different target audiences about this. And this, I think, has been a pretty good kickoff meeting for that. Why don't we look at our calendar and make a time for next week, and maybe this is a standing meeting where we just kind of we see if we can establish a regular weekly hour or so to check in, and then take a look at that to-do list and, do something, right? So
Thursdays actually work well for me, except the 25th is Rosh Hashanah.
Oh, yeah.
If you can spell that correctly, then you win today's prize.
So how about next Thursday? Oh, next Thursday, Mary Mowen's oral defense, but it's done at 10, 8:30, 9:30. Then I have a meeting with Julie 1 to 3. So next Thursday is tough.
Bring your lunch.
Well, but we could. And what's the 19th or what's the 18th like for you, Frank?
It's good.
Okay, so let's give this one 2 weeks, and we'll really have a chance to get something done. We're going to have a propaganda meeting where we're going to all have share stuff you have done. And you like the idea that it's at 9 or 9:30?
Works for me.
9:30 is a little better for me.
Okay.
So Thursday, September, does that work for you, Lily? Jonathan, does that work for you? Thursday, September 18th at 9:30. Okay, and then we skip the next week because that's Rosh Hashanah, and we go into the following week, which would be Thursday, October 2nd. Does that work for you? Thursday, October 2nd?
I'll tell you in a moment.
What is the thing with Clarissa?
I think it's just a meeting. So we can work around Clarissa. How does that look for you, Lily and Frank?
October 2nd works.
So we're going to say propaganda meeting on Thursday, October 2nd at 9:30. Cool. Frank, right now after this call, we're going to send you the lesson plan stuff. You'll see that it's a little bit underwhelming. I think given that you have looked at a ton of curriculum, I've put myself down as like drafting a template, but I feel like we're going to do that together. So I'm going to do a start of that, and then you're going to finish it, okay? So
I'll be happy to also send you a template that the South Carolina State Department of Education asked me to use recently when writing some visual art. I thought it was a very good template.
Perfect. I like it. And one of the things that's nice about that is that if it's used at the state level, it's already been through a whole lot of review process, right?
Don't you know it? Don't you know it?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. So why don't you? Oh, now I'm going to establish a Dropbox. Frank, have you ever used Dropbox?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Good show. So we're going to establish a Dropbox for this. One of the things I was thinking about, Lily, is that as we start, you're going to start seeing examples everywhere. So I think we're all going to start throwing stuff into the Dropbox. And then I think we're going to throw stuff into the Dropbox with this idea that we're going to create a image file or an image file. And then we're going to create some kind of spreadsheet that lets us link the image to the description, and each person who submits something is going to be responsible for writing the description. So Lily, you'll take charge of creating that stuff so we can start. I think in the next 2 weeks we should be on the lookout and kind of try, if each of us puts in 10 examples, that's 40 examples between the four of us. So I think we'll have a richer conversation about refining the curriculum once we have some examples that we think can be the beginning meat of the stuff. So, other questions or issues before we depart?
What is the meaning of life?
Frank, we will discuss that over a nice scotch on the rocks when I see you in Chicago, not this weekend, but next weekend, all right?
I'm looking forward to it, Renee.
Me too. Thank you so much for joining on this project. It's really great. It's going to be fun to work with you. Lily and Jonathan, thank you for being part of the team, and we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. All right, bye.
Bye-bye.